And it just kept happening and happening. And I remember kind of sitting up in bed and looking around, and I like, where the voice is coming from, where the voice is coming from. And I couldn't figure out where it's coming from. Like, am I awake? Am I really awake? I don't know. I think I'm awake and moving around. And I remember seeing like I called them little people kind of coming out of the shadows. It was really weird. I'm like, what are these little people? But it looked like it was kind of like they were melding out of the shadows. And I remember them walking closer, and some of them would be pointing at me, and some of them would be.
Yes, and many children see them too. About 75% of the world's children today are being born with etheric vision. And when your children talk with people and have daydream playmates, the chances are they are actually speaking to some of these people, because these angels or angelic forces or nature spirits, as they're often called, will often make themselves seen.
Whatever it is, it looks every bit like a fairy and very little like anything else.
But seriously, it kind of looks like a fairy. Just kind of doesn't look like your standard moth.
I know that the paranormal is real. Listen.
But I wasn't going to make this video until I looked a little bit closer and I realized after it lands behind my bench, it disappears. And it just vanishes. And in fact, I went outside to look, to try to find it, to see if it was trash, to see if it was a bug, to see if it was a leaf, like trying to figure out what it could be, and it was gone. It just vanished.
What's that? Yeah. What's what? Yeah, look. Right up there. Insect or something.
Is that an insect? Let's have a look. What is it?
I don't know. Oh my god!
Oh.
What happens to people who cut down fairy films?
Did you see it? Huh? Did you see it?
Yeah, me and him saw it.
What'd you see?
It was like a big creature.
A big creature?
Yeah, like around 10 feet tall.
I'm not going to BS you guys. One of my partners said they saw something fall out of the sky too, so that's why I'm kind of curious. Did you see anything land in your backyard?
But the paranormal is real. Is it? But the paranormal is real.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Fascinating Fae podcast. I hope everybody is having a great evening tonight. Tonight, we're very fortunate to be joined by a fellow Canadian and an Indigenous person. We're going to be joined tonight by Frozen Wolf, calling in from Ontario, Canada. For those who haven't put it together yet, I'm also Canadian. And so just at the start of this program, if I may, I would like to do a land acknowledgement. Here in Canada, we're trying to move towards reconciliation with regards to the very, negative history of colonialism in this country. And so I just really appreciate being given a chance to host you, being given a chance to host you on, unceded traditional territory of the First Peoples of Canada. So just wanted to say that. I think it is important that does get acknowledged where possible in culture. So just wanted to get that out of the way. Now, before we bring Frozen Wolf on, would like to just point out that Frozen Wolf has a really extensive background with the paranormal. So one of the reasons I'm really excited to hear about your encounters here tonight is you're going to be able to give some insights, I believe, to some things that I have questions about. And I'm sure that the audience, also has questions about. So the way that I like to do things here on the show is just reminding you that, we're not here to convince anyone of anything. We're here on the Fascinating Fae podcast to collect fascinating stories of encounters with fairies. And so with that said, what I would like to ask you to do, please, Frozen Wolf, is if you could please be so kind, as for myself and for the audience, just to walk us into your first encounter with a fairy, please. Just let us know, sort of what was going on, like what kind of context we might want to know, sort of where you were, that sort of stuff, and then just walk us into your encounter and tell us what happened, please.
All right, I'll start, I guess, when I was really, really young. My parents' home was actually built in 1932, and they moved in the early 1980s. And I remember being, how old was I? I think I was like 4 or 5, and my sister was just born, so I got moved into one of the extra spare bedrooms upstairs. And I was really a little, uncomfortable a little bit about it. My mom knew that I was sensitive. It runs on my mom's side of the family. So she let me sleep with the whole room light on, which is great, And I remember sometimes at night, at the beginning it started, it was mostly usually in the spring, where I'd be laying in bed facing the wall, and I'd be hearing like whispers and talking. And, in my head, I'm thinking, okay, it's just my imagination, I'm making it up or something like that. I'm like, my mom used to tell me, okay, maybe you're dreaming, just try to work through it. And it just kept happening and happening. And I remember kind of sitting up in bed and looking around, and I like, where the voice is coming from, And I couldn't figure out where it's coming from. Like, am I awake? Am I really awake? I don't know. I think I'm awake and moving around. And I remember seeing like I called them little people kind of coming out of the shadows of my room. Like, you still have the room lit up, but I would have like a big box of toys, or I'd have my art table set up, and then my bed was actually, it actually had a full size, what are they called, box spring on the bottom. So there was no like monster under the bed kind of thing to it. So it was really weird. I'm like, what are these little people? Because it looked like it was kind of like they were melding out of the shadows. And I remember them walking closer, and some of them would be pointing at me, and some of them would be talking, some of them in English, some of them not in English. And I found it weird. They wore like really weird clothes. One of them, I guess, the best comparison would be like a witch's kind of hat. Kind of look feel to it. Some of them looked a little chunky, some of them looked a little skinny. And I don't know what they were saying. I don't recall any of that anymore, but talking to him for a while, and I was like, then I tried talking to them, and none of them talked back to me about anything. And I was just like, okay. So I was kind of like frozen in fear at the sense though too, because almost like you see these things walking around your room, you still think you're making it up, and then they get closer and closer to the bed. And I remember getting a little bit more scared and kind of just like being stuck in that frozen sense where you're like just staring off because you're in so much fear. And I remember going, okay, this is weird. All right. And I'm like, I don't really want to scream out because I don't know if I'm still sleeping or not. And I'm still sitting up in bed, so move around. And I remember my blankets being like pulled on my feet. And I looked, and they were literally trying to pull me out of bed feet first. And I was freaking out, really, really freaking out. And I just like, you wanted to scream out, but like I said, you're like frozen. You don't really screaming at all. And I was able to start kicking my feet away, and I was able to, push myself back up and put myself underneath the blankets up to where my neck was. And so looking at them, like, who are these people? And then they were like walking right beside my bed, and I think they were about my height at the time. And I had one of them point at me, and then another one point at them, another one. And it was like they were kind of like arguing and discussing about something. I don't know what they were saying because they weren't speaking English again. And I remember one of them pointing to the guy at the feet, and he started trying to pull my legs again. And I just kept getting more and more freaked out. I'm like, sitting there in my bed, just kind of like, trying to pull myself back up again. Eventually, then they'd be arguing again. I think one guy hit the other guy in the head. And I remember just being frozen to the point where I was just, hyperventilating. And it got pretty scary. And eventually I just fell asleep from it all because it was just too much for me as a little kid. And the next morning I'd get up and I'd have bruises around my ankles, and told my mom about what had happened. And she's Roman Catholic, so she just said all she could figure out was, because she wasn't really taught any of that stuff either growing up. Because in their back, it was more taboo back then. So she just said all you can do is pray, and well, that never did anything with any of that. So next night it was about the same thing again, except for I remember waking up and feeling I heard the talking, but then I felt like my boat being pulled out of bed again, and then I seen them show up again. And I remember just sitting there like, and I was just terrified. I was holding my stuffed animals, and I was just like sitting there crying, and I'm like, I don't know what to do. I don't know what to do. Once again, I passed out from just the fear of it all. And then I remember the following night, I fell asleep earlier before I went to bed. I was just really tired, and I was falling asleep. My mom got me. I think it was like a wolf stuffed animal, and I don't like dolls. They creep me out. It's just a little beady eyes, kind of looks like you're looking into your soul. So I never like dolls. So I remember sitting there, and I had her in my arms again. I'm crying into it, and as I'm falling asleep, I said, I wish you could be alive, and I wish you could protect me. Just as a kid, you just wish your stuffed animals could be alive, because they're like your heroes. And I said, because I just can't deal with this anymore. Like, I don't know what to do, and nothing's working. And I went to sleep, and I had this dream. And in the dream, I was shown images. You're a little kid at the time. Your dreams are going to be different than they are as an adult. To put my stuffed animals on the floor around my bed. And I was like, okay. And I remember doing that. I get up, and I'm like, okay, let's try this. And then I went back to bed thinking, okay, they might be showing up, a little bit. They showed up around maybe 1 or 2 in the morning. And I didn't have an issue that night. It was interesting. I just had it in there. I didn't have an issue that night. And I don't know. At the time, I didn't know why. But I kept doing that over and over again. I just, put that on the floor, and I told my mom. She's like, well, if it works, it works, right? If the dream told you to do it, maybe your guides are telling you to do it. So I did that. And for that little bit, I didn't have any issues with it for a while. And then I don't remember it happening again until I think I was like 6 with a different story.
This is fascinating to me. May I ask you some questions about these people? And it's okay if you can't recall, because I do know this was a long time ago, but is it all right with you if I ask some questions, if I may?
Yeah,
please?
yes, go ahead.
So, about how big are they exactly? I just want to sort of get a sense of the size.
The little people.
Please.
So I was laying in a bed. The mattress was normal thickness as a mattress back then, and it was on like a wooden bed frame, but it was solid, so there was no weight for anything going underneath the bed at all. So maybe it was about 2 feet off the floor, and they seemed to, when I was laying down, they seemed to be like a foot or two taller than where I was laying down, so maybe about 4 or 5 feet tall.
Interesting. So a pretty decent height, actually, a pretty decent size. I can understand why you were terrified. I know you mentioned hearing them speaking, and it's okay that you can't recall what they were saying. Is there any type of details about how they sounded that you might be able to recall for the audience, please?
Kind of a little bit grungy, a little bit when they spoke more in their own language, like a little grungy, kind of like wispy, kind of throat kind of voice. And then English, it was more like they were attempting to speak more of the English language, so it sounded more like our Canadian accents that we have.
And these entities, approximately how many do you think were in your room at sort of the peak point? How many were in there approximately?
I think they started with 2, and then I think the max that ever showed up was 4. So there was like one big guy, like the really big chunky guy with the weird hat. Now that if you think about it, that I've studied a little bit of Fae, it kind of looks a little bit more like one of those walking gnome kind of things. Kind of look a little bit like that. And then the other 3 kind of look more scrangly kind of things. Kind of look like, I've never seen the movie Harry Potter. I've only seen clips of it. My family's watched it. Kind of looks more like how Dobby's like small little skinny body was like.
I'm also not a Harry Potter person, so that reference won't connect with me, but I'm sure members of the audience listening will understand. Let me ask you, please, about the chunky fellow. So just go ahead and describe that as much as you can. Any kind of details that you can recall about its appearance are helpful.
He wore, like I said, that weird looking witch's hat kind of like style to it. Kind of felt like a very old world medieval kind of look to it. And then he had like normal brown looking pants that he had on. And it's like kind of looked like he might have maybe like a brownish or a little bit of color to it, like a little bit of a red or green color to like the shirt, but it all looks like it was hand sewn. You can actually see where the stitches were.
And did it appear that this, we'll call him the chunky guy, because I think that's how you referred to him. Was the chunky guy in any way directing the others? Was it? I'm just curious if there was any type of visible dynamic between them. I know you said they were arguing. I'm just kind of curious about if it seemed like anyone was in charge or something of that nature.
He did seem like he was the one in charge. The other ones kind of just seemed to be like just following his orders in that sense.
I've heard this before where more full-size Fae seem to be working like a group of people would, you know, with a foreman and other people that are helping get the job done effectively. I find that very interesting. May I ask, Frozen Wolf, why do you think they were in your room? What do you think they wanted with you?
I don't know at the time. I have no idea. I really have no idea. I know later on when I found out, did more research on it later down the years when the internet actually came out, that they have it. There's some types of Fae that I guess have a connection to the lore of the Changeling, where they go and they'll steal children or babies and bring them back to where they are and replace them with a kind of like a clone. I have no idea. That's just the first thing that came to mind. I'm like, well, I'm not going anywhere, and I'm kicking them around and stuff.
One thing about your encounter that is really fascinating is your description of bruises on your ankles. So when these Fae were grabbing you, you could physically feel that. Is that correct? Is that accurate?
Yes, they were solid. They were like literally like there's one of them was like I was near the edge of the bed when I was facing him, and he could just easily reached over and touch me, and it's like a good like half a foot. And then with the feet, he had his little hands and just grabbing on right around it and just trying to pull me out.
Thank you very much for telling us about that experience when you were younger in your room. Terrifying. And again, very glad that you survived that. If you would, I know that you've got some other stories that you'd like to share with the audience regarding your encounters with the Fae. And so I'd be happy to hand the mic over to you and let you walk us into some additional encounters, please. I'm very fascinated to hear about some additional stories. Thank you, Frozen Wolf.
Yeah, you're welcome. The next one I think I was when I was 6 or 7. And I was actually in the other room where my sister was now at the time because my other sister was born. So we got flipped into the other room again. And we were on bunk beds now. My younger sister slept on the bottom and I slept on the top. Once again, we had the large hallway light on because I can't sleep in the dark again. My mom was fine with it. And it was a really bad thunder and lightning storm. Like the hometown where I'm from, it's right on the shores of Lake Erie. So when you get thunderstorms, you get tornadoes, and the weather is really bad. The windstorms and everything. So it's an old house. It's creaking. It's shaking, and the thunderstorms are constant enough where it looks like it's a strobe light, and it gets dangerous because trees fall and everything. So I was freaking out. Wasn't enough for my mom called us downstairs yet, but I remember going upstairs. I remember being up in my top bunk, and I'm just like right pretty close to the ceiling, right in the top, and you're right close to the ceiling. So I remember getting really spooked out, so that I threw a pillow at my sister below me, and I said, "Can I come down and sleep with you?" Because it's freaking me out. I do not like thunder and lightning at all. So she's like, "Yeah, you can come down, me." But she sleeps like not. She just passes out. She's one of the people that can sleep through anything. So I went down there, and then she slept closer to the edge of the bed, and I slept closer to the wall. And I remember about an hour into it, I heard noises, and I'm going, okay, it's fine. I said, maybe it's the cat, trying to crawl into bed, or maybe it's, they're doing something, whatever. So I turned over and rolled over, and I looked, and I seen this look. I think at the time I called it a little person staring at me. He had this beautiful blue eyes and this very gentle face. He kind of looked like a perfectly proportionate person, but shorter. So like there's the dwarfism in the world, but they're the body's unproportionate to the body. But this is like perfectly proportionate person, but they were short, and you could tell that they were an adult. And it was a male. He stood maybe about 4 feet or 3.5 feet, 4 feet tall. A little bit, well built, nicely dressed, clean clothes and stuff. But what he was wearing kind of interested me. Like, it was raining really heavy though too. Like, you can hear the rain hitting everything. It's an old house, so you can really hear it loud. I remember looking at him, but I had fear, but I didn't have the fear of the other ones. And he wore like a necklace, but it was all like small shells, like you would pick up at the beach, because we live in the shores of Lake Erie, so we just pick small little shells that you would get, kind of like that. And then he wore like clothing. It was all like patchwork together, but it was beautiful, intricate designs of texture. I'm an artist, so I can really pick up on detail with things like that. And it was all hand stitched, like I'm saying. And I remember him just looking at me, but and when the lightning struck and I just kind of like cowered with my hands over my head a little bit, he just looked at me concerned, very concerned looking. And I must say the same thing again. It's not real. It's probably my imagination. I'm probably asleep again. Like, the first thing comes to mind, right? Because you're told that so many times. And my mom, but my mom kept saying, if you go to sleep and you wake back up, and it's gone. It's probably you were dreaming. So I'm like, okay, I'm going to turn over. He doesn't seem to be doing anything. He's not hurting me. He's just watching me, and he's, watching me and following with his eyes. Very gentle blue eyes. So I remember, turning back when I put my blankets over me, and I'm like, I'm probably sleeping. I'm probably probably sleeping. And I remember falling asleep. I think it was like for a few minutes, and I'm thinking, okay, I'm, laying there. I'm like, should I look? Was I asleep? And I'm waking up, and I go up, wake up again. He's still there. I'm like, shouldn't you be gone by now in my head? And I remember he was there then. So then I tried falling asleep and waking up, and he was still there. But he was just looking at me, and every time I would cower, he'd look at me concerned and stuff. Then he'd give me the gentle, calming eyes. And it was really weird, but it's almost as if like he seemed to kind of like, it's hard to describe. When the rain would really pick up, it kind of looked like he had a little bit of like a blue aura around him. And then when you hear the rain like and stuff calming down, or you hear it stopping, it's almost as if it kind of looked like he was fading a little bit. It was really weird. And then I remember I finally passed out completely from it. And I remember waking up the next morning, and I went to turn over a little bit. My sister was already got up. It's like bright light. It was like 7 or 8 in the morning. This was in the summertime. And I'm like going, oh, it's gone. So I'm like peering, because the bunk bed was closed off. So I'm like slowly peering my head out, looking left or right. I'm like, is he there? And then I remember going, okay, he's gone. And I'm like slowly walking around, checking the closet and everything as I'm walking by, because it's an open closet. It's an old house, has no door. Walking down, then I get down the stairs and stuff. And then I poke my sister, and I'm like, did you feel anything last night? She's like, what are you talking about? She's like, I didn't hear anything. I slept through the whole storm. And I'm like, you didn't feel anything? You didn't wake up and see anybody? And she's like, no. She was like, are you seeing them again? I said, I don't think it's the same. And I'm like, oh, okay. So then I talked to my mom about it, and she's like, well, every time it was that bad, maybe it was a water type, like a water elemental type kind of thing. Because like the eyes were just beautiful blue eyes. It was just like amazing. But I don't know. It's so weird. But I'm like, okay. So I just felt like, it's like when he was looking at me, it just felt like there was like more like a calmness, even though he scared me. Because it's like you're not used to having that jump scare where you turn around and someone's staring at you, right? And then if you move around in bed, their eyes are following you. So it was really weird. But that was the one that I had when I was around 6 or 7.
That's also fascinating to me. The bluish light, the bluish aura is also something I've heard before in fairy encounters. It almost sounds, and I'm just listening to your description with a lot of attention, maybe it sounds like he was trying to comfort you a little bit with his eyes, like his gentle eyes. It is sort of what I'm hearing from you.
It may be, yeah, that's what I'm thinking, because when I've gone through the years now, even like where my birthday lines up, even like where I was born and the weather and everything, my name, and even the one ninja's name I was given, all have to do with water. Like, I'm very much a water type.
Yeah, the bluish aura is very interesting. I'm not sure what that was, but I have heard many people that have had encounters with what they identify as a fairy. That's how it feels to them. That was a fairy having a bluish aura. Mine that I saw was like very intense purple, but purple and blue are in that sort of spectrum of that range of hue. So I wonder if there's something to that. Just with regards to, is there a pattern with a particular hue of aura or a particular hue associated with sightings that can help you identify, is that a fairy or something else? Would you be so kind? I know you've got some additional stories to share. I would love to hear some more if you're feeling up to it and if you've got some time.
Yeah, I do have time, but I also recall something from the first story that I forgot because I'm keeping track of notes. When the when they would meld through the dark shadows, I remember seeing like a weird. I used to complain about this to my mom because I wasn't sure what was going on, but there was like a really dark, deep green, but mixed in with really dark black mist that would come through that.
Interesting. Can you, so the mist would, can you just describe how the mist would appear? Would it come from the shadows?
Yeah, it would come from the shadows where they came from, and I used to call I used to tell my mom I used to call it the green slime because it would just come out like really weird like that, like along the floor, but it was more like a mist.
And that would precede their arrival, would it? Is that correct?
Sometimes it'd fill the room too when they were there, like along the floor very faintly, and then sometimes before they showed up. Yep.
Interesting. What kind of thickness of fog? Like, was it hard to see through?
No, it was more like when it first came in, it was kind of just bellowing near where like the shadow spots where I seen them come in, and then afterwards, when it came in, it was kind of looked like it was just fading away. It was more along the ground.
Are you able to recall if there was any other things associated with their arrival, like a sound or anything else?
It was just I would hear it. It was like I would be hearing just talking or just whispers, as if kind of feels like it's coming from the walls. It's really weird.
Interesting. Yeah, or potentially from an alternate dimensional plane from which these people are making their way from into our dimensional plane. I don't know for sure, but I do believe that energy beings are coming from somewhere. And I do believe that we are ourselves a type of energy being contained within a flesh and blood body. So it's not that hard to understand because we can recognize the presence of our own souls within ourselves as something intangible yet present. And we're just, I think, locked into this dimension from our physical selves. Whereas I think the people I'm speaking to are encountering real creatures, real entities, real species of earthbound life forms, but they are able to do more with their energy bodies than we are. And that might be because they maintain their energy bodies differently or they maintain their forms differently. But going back to what I said earlier, I don't really think that we are all that different, which is why we're both able to interact with these things and experience them. I just think that other entities have a nature that allows them easily to do the type of things we're describing, such as coming from one dimensional plane to another, whereas we really have to work at it with like meditation or other practices that to get there. So that's a really interesting detail. Thank you for remembering that. If it's okay, if there's no other details about the first or second stories that you'd like to add, would you please be so kind as to share some of your other stories with us, please?
Yes, I don't mind continuing on. Next one we jump to is camping. This ranges from when I was a little kid. I think we started going camping every summer for 2 weeks. It's at Chippewa Creek Conservation Area. It's in Wellandport, Ontario. That I can give away because it's nowhere connected to anybody. And I think what years was that? I think I was started when I was 8, and then just before my car accident in 2012, the spring and that summer before that was the last time I went camping. So it was almost every summer. So my family would go. It was family camping trip. We had other families that had their plots, and we had been there about a week or two. And it was nice because to me it was great. And I think from what I found out a while ago, I'm not 100% correct on this. It used to be indigenous land as well. The animals there are completely different on a whole new level. Like they're not afraid of people. They'll come up to you and just interact with you, eat out of your hand, and like it's just nuts. It's so like ecosystem friendly. Everybody's almost like a Disney princess kind of feel to it. So it was really weird. Now the tent thing from the first time I did it, as I got older, I got more used to it. I guess the attention from them, but when I was younger, it used to freak me out. When I was younger, it was a little bit easier because when I was a kid, my mom slept in the same tent with us, obviously because I was like really young. And that was, you know, I would see like fingers running along the tent on the outside, kind of look like little fingers indents on that. And I would open up the door. I'm thinking, okay, who's outside? I can hear things. You can sometimes hear like a smack on the side of the tent, and then, you know, wake up my mom. I'm like, someone outside? You know, she'd get up with her small little mini hunting knife, you know, because we're camping there. You know, never someone might try to sneak into the tent, so gotta protect the kids. And she'd like open up the door and she'd look around. She's like, no, there's no one here and stuff. And I said, well, someone keeps messing with the tent. She's like, don't worry, I'll stay up for a little bit and I'll you know, make sure what's going on, and then you can get some sleep. So all right. So I had that for a few years and stuff, and at that point, mom still went out and did all that. And then about, I think, preteen to my teenage years, I started switching over to my own little small one-person tent, and I would have the same thing again. But at that point, it was more like I don't have anything with me. Let's like have my flashlight. That's about it. Even though I'm right beside her tent. So I go out, look around, I see nothing. So I'm like, fine, you know what? I'm just gonna keep my windows open. So if someone walks by, like my door one and my side ones, someone walks by, I'll be able to catch them with my flashlight. I'm gonna wait up for a little bit. So I remember laying in there and seeing it again. So I could get up and put the flashlight through it, and you're trying to see, and you're in the woods a little bit. Okay, can't see anything. And then I remember that I see better when it's dark than it's light, because for me, that's another reason why I don't like sleep with the light on, is because I like to sleep with the light on is because like spirits and stuff like that, I call them glow, like kind of like glow bugs, so I can see them more of an outline of them because they actually, you know, I can see them better. So I was like, okay, I'll turn the flashlight off and see if it's something not, you know, related to human beings, then I might be able to see something. So I turned it off, and then I looked out the window and I heard like kind of sound like just someone walking on grass. There was no whispers or nothing. And I remember hearing the crickets right along the creek, right near the side of the creek, and then you hear, you know, some of the frogs and stuff in there too. But I seen this shadow walk by, not like you would see for like shadow people. And I like sit up and I look out, and I just seen like an outline. It's standing pretty tall. There was one looking. It was like about 5 feet away, and the outline. But then until it turned its head for where I could see like the moonlight hit it, it kind of looked like I had branches like on as part of its head. I guess you'd call them like a crown of like branches or something, but it looked like it was actually made of that. More like wood related, and it had no aura that I could see around it. Sometimes in its hand, it would kind of look like branchy looking hand, and it had like little, I guess, little dust particles you would see. I guess people would call like magic, I guess, but I feel like dust particles, just like light and stuff, like little, you know, orbs of light and stuff in its hand sometimes as it was walking. But it would just tilt its head and look at me, and it had like solid green eyes compared to the other one that was blue. It had more of the big blue eyes. It was more like the actual solid. You wouldn't see any pupils or anything. It was more like just like his eyes were just glowing. Felt like something like out of a fantasy or a sci-fi movie kind of mixture. And I'm looking at it, and I'm like, okay. And then, you know, I just hear it just walking around. And then I go lay down. And, you know, the next night there was like another one, but it wasn't the same type. It was kind of look more like it was more humanoid, like the ones I've seen before. Just walking around. And it was just so weird. And I'm like, okay. And then eventually I got like, you know, year after year, I kind of got more and more used to it. And to the point where I just hear them walking around. I just you know, okay, I just sit up. I'm like, I would ask them just to quiet down a little bit. And if you hear them walking around on the grass and stuff would quiet down, I'd just go to bed. But I'd get up and sometimes in the middle of the night to use the bathroom. And, you know, you won't see anything. But once I go back in the tent, they're just hanging out there again. But after a while, I was fine with it. There was no threat. They're kind of like, you know what, I think it was just due to the land. Like I said, it just felt like the animals were interacting with people. They come up, you know, they would interact with you a lot, like you don't usually normally see, maybe because it's a conservation area. I don't know. It could be due to the land. It could be just due to maybe seeing all this fae and they're just attracted to why I'm able to see them. Maybe it's something about me that they like. I have no idea. It's all this stuff is going through my head. I'm like, you know what? Just, it is what it is, and just gotta just live with it.
You know, that's fascinating to me. What you're describing, like a tree spirit, almost, it sounds like, or a spirit. If you have seen the movie Lord of the Rings, I think they're the Ents that are the big tree guys, that are like an animated tree. They're a living tree that walks around. It sounds somewhat similar to that. Also, I'll mention for the audience listening and for you, there's a Canadian First Nations stop motion artist named Amanda Strong, and she has a stop motion like like movie studio called Spotted Fawn Productions, and she made a stop motion movie independently a few years back, and in it there is a depiction of a young Indigenous girl, and she's kind of like in the suburbs, and you can tell like she doesn't belong there, and like the suburbs are sitting on top of what used to be like beautiful natural land, and everything is all like backwards in this perspective through this stop motion movie. And in it, she's communicating with a spirit of the forest that used to live where the suburb is now sitting. And it is very similar to what you were talking about. And I think that I would like to send you a link to that stop motion movie for you to look at, because when you were talking, it immediately, like my subconscious immediately brought up that image that Amanda Strong, and I met her at an independent film viewing, and I asked her what the inspiration was for that piece, and she said she saw that thing. And oh, I'm getting goosebumps. It's funny. Ooh, full body goosebumps there. That's interesting. She said she saw it, and it would continue to enter her home for weeks and weeks and weeks afterwards after, oh gosh, my goosebumps are out of control right now. Sorry. It would come into her home for weeks and weeks and weeks after she saw it. And she said that it was like happy that someone could see it. And so it would seek her out almost because it knew that she could see it. And so she made this stop motion thing. It cost her tons of money and took her like 5 years to do, just to get to capture what it was like to encounter this thing. And so I just find that really fascinating. Frozen Wolf, may I ask about any other stories that you'd like to add? And out of respect for your time, just let me know when you need to go, and we can wrap it up. I always like to ask a couple of finishing questions, but before we get there, yeah, if you did have any additional stories, I got such big goosebumps on your last one. I would like to hear another one if I could, please.
I think I have one big one that just ended recently. That one was going on for years.
Okay, well, yeah, just take your time and walk the audience into this final story that you've been so kind to share with us, your previous 3 stories. Thank you for letting me ask all those curious questions. And again, just really appreciate you being here and giving us an insight into what you are experiencing. I really appreciate that a lot. And I'm sure people listening are going to be fascinated. As well, there's people listening who are going to have very similar experiences to the ones that you're describing. And it is brave of you to speak plainly about these experiences. And I know through my position, because I get to kind of hear from everybody, you're going to be bringing comfort to others that have also experienced similar things, because no one is experiencing these phenomena alone. These are actual events. And there's a lot to unpack and a lot of untold stories going on. So I really do appreciate you being here and appreciate the bravery and the time. So please just let us know about this last story. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. I'm trying my best with trying to recall everything. Good thing I keep my notes. Okay, so the last one ranges from 2008 to about 2 or 3 years ago, actually. It's a long timeline for it, but I'll sum it up with a lot of it. So when I lived out in Nanaimo before, we lived out there for like how many years? I think it was 2 or 3 years we were there. Something out there, we had like a ground level condo, and I saw it as more like the ghetto part of Nanaimo in that sense. I'm not going to describe how bad the environment we were living in, but it's the only place you could rent. Across the street was an old, I think it's like a mom and pop business they had, and then behind it was a forest. It's gone now. It's been leveled a few years ago. It's now industrial. But they also had a huge dumpster back there. So my friends and I were outside and we're chit-chatting. And we seen this guy run to behind the business, because the business was from the road. The business was situated where you could see the side of the business when you're going along the road. So the front of the business was like you actually had to go off the road into a parking lot onto the business. So the front entrance was not facing the actual road. So that's why we could see the side and the back of the forest. So I said, yeah, just see that guy run out. He went near the dumpster and he threw something in, and it looks like it was on fire. So my friends and the family member I was living with, they were like, we got to call the fire department. So they called the fire department in there. It started spreading pretty good in there, and then it was starting to kind of jump into the forest behind it. And I'm like, oh no, right? Because me and my friends were like, like it's nature, you must save the forest. So they showed up and they were able to get it in time. I think we only lost a couple of branches of the forest, and I think the dumpster was a write off at that point. The building was concrete at the back, so I think it was just black. It was fine. And they caught the guy because we pointed where we saw him run, and the police did find him later on. So they actually caught. He was an arsonist. He just decided to set it on fire, I guess. So my friends left and stuff for the night. Me and my family member went back into the condo, and that was it for the night. We thought like, yay, we saved a forest and stuff. So we're sitting there. We normally do for the night, and then we all go to bed. And then the family member ends up having a dream and they don't really dream very often. It's very, very rare. And this big dream became very vivid. And he was saying how he saw this small little person come up to him in the dream and saying, "Thank you for saying care of my forest. It's my home." Same similar kind of like size as he was describing to me, like the same ones that I saw, which I assume were the dark fae. And but he seemed different. He seemed like he was a different, species and type altogether. And I'm like, okay. I'm like, I described it to him because my friends and I were a lot of people in the area have a lot of fae experiences. So we were chit chatting a bit about it. So I said, okay, what else happened? And then he said he pointed to the forest and stuff. He was able to speak English and, saying that, repeating again that it was his home and he was happy that we saved it. And I'm like, how would he know? Like we called like the fire department, like was someone watching? So I'm like, oh, okay, that's cool. We didn't think nothing about it. We're like, good, we saved a forest. Maybe it was a fae. We saved a fae. That's cool with that. And then we started having these weird things happen in the condo. Like our condo was ground level, so it was like a step up one. So it was one above us, but then you had to do stairs, and then above that, so there was no elevator or anything. It was like a step up one. So I remember our condo had baseboard heaters because it was such an old 1960s like falling apart kind of condo. And I remember one time we had two cats. We had Gizmo and Vladimir, and my cat Gizmo, he's actually a dwarf cat. He was a rescue, but he was born very, very small stature. Kind of looks like a kitten size in that sense. A little bit unproportionate, but that's okay. That's why he's a dwarf cat. So we left him at home. I think we went to the movies or something, and it got a little chilly because this was the fall. Not to the point where it was starting to the trees were starting to the leaves, but it was starting to get a little chilly at night. And we came back and we're like, oh, it's a little cold. And I'm like in my room, but then we walked into the two rooms where we usually put the heat on, if we need to for the cats before we leave, in case they're cold. But we were going home, like, did you put the heat on? He's like, I didn't put the heat on. Did you put the heat on? I'm like, no. But it was set at the exact temperature that we normally keep it at. I'm like, I don't remember putting it on because before we left it was warm. Sometimes in Canada you get the snaps where it's like, warm and then cold and it, fluctuates. So I'm like, okay, because my one cat, he had trouble with his lung, and I mean, it was his heart, so he couldn't have it too cold or too hot. So yeah, we always had to make sure we kept it regulated. So I'm like, okay, I'm thinking it's a one-off thing. Maybe someone, maybe I'm thinking to myself, he's thinking him, like maybe I forgot, and you thinking that he forgot, kind of thing. So I'm thinking the other person just forgot. So then then we started seeing like things going missing in our house or our condo. And we find them in weird spots, not to be like malicious where it's like it's stolen, hey, you need this, like maybe it's your meds or something, like you need this or that, it's gone missing. It's more like you would find like keys that would be usually like beside the bed. They'd be like on the kitchen counter so that you can easily grab your coffee in the morning because you would have to go to work, right? So kind of like in weird spots like that, we'd finding weird things. Or we'd find like I like to suck on candy canes because it helps a little with nausea sometimes. With meds, it was not the time would cause nausea, so I just suck on candy canes. And then I would find those around the house. And I thought my cats got into them. Like, no, they can't, the dwarf cat can't jump up that high because he's all, his legs and stuff are not meant for that. And the other cat could care less because it's not fresh meat. Or I don't know, he was just obsessed with all that. So, and we would put it away and stuff. But we would find it. We'd find pieces of candy canes everywhere, just like crumbled up or like a bite mark sticking out of it. Like, all right. And I'm thinking to myself, sweet stuff, things going missing. It sounds suspicious. And I'm like, that sounds very Fae-like. Interesting. They love their sweets and their honey and their candies. I'm like, why not? So, and then I was like, it went on for a while. We just got to the fact of like, okay, well, maybe our thing was, well, maybe the thing from that was living in the forest decided to move in with us. Maybe he's like, oh, maybe my forest might be like, this is all thoughts we were trying to figure out. Maybe he thought, well, you know what? We like these people. They're really, really nice. And maybe he didn't have a companion. I don't know. We're trying to figure all this stuff out. Or maybe he might think later on that I might start another fire. Maybe he didn't feel safe anymore. Maybe he somehow got attachment, because I know Fae can get attached to you sometimes, and they become very territorial, and they can be protective too in that sense, or also be a good omen for a home too in some other senses. So I'm like, okay, whatever, he's doing all this good stuff. We'll just keep an eye on him, make sure it's kind of like a wolf in sheep's clothing kind of thing going on, being really cautious with it. And then we started noticing that in any condo or anything you have, they have a small little, I call it the little mini closets, where they usually have the hot water tank in some places, and other ones they have like the furnaces in the actual like apartment style condos. They have like little mini closets for that stuff. You can change the filter and things. So we started noticing my dwarf cat really started hanging out in that near that one spot. At one point we came home and he was actually in there. He was fine. It was turned off because of the time being where we didn't really use a lot of it, so it was still cold, but because it was one of the ones that I have to heat up, and if you don't, it just stay cold. It's just really, it's an old building. So he would be in their little closet room, and I'm like, how'd you get in there? I didn't put him in there. Like, did the other cat? I don't think the other cat put him in there. But he'd be in there, and it'd be like he liked to play fetch with tinfoil and paper balls, but he had found a whole collection of them in there too. And I'm going, oh, geez. So I'm like, okay, well, as long as no one's getting hurt, right? Just let's deal with that. So, because I'm the kind of person, like, I grew up with spirits and stuff where, they'll coexist as long as the nice ones. I just see other people just hanging out with you. And, as long as everybody respects everybody, I'm cool with it. So I was like, okay. So then we lived for about 2 years, and it's just on and on. I told him not to put him in the cupboard anymore in case it heats up, though. It's just in case, because, I don't want him hurt. So after that, he didn't go more locked in that one little door. That one little closet area. So we were coming, and we let him, and then, we were packing to move back to Ontario in 2010. And, I let him know, I said, we're leaving. I let him know, like, if you really want to, like, you can come with us. I'm cool with that. Like, I don't mind. Like, I'm cool with that. Everybody needs a home, right? So, and he ended up coming with us. So we're assuming. So we went to the first place we moved into was like a rental house, and then had the full unfinished basement, and it has the one basement, the part where they had like the furnace and stuff was one to the side. It was all open though too. So I remember my dwarf cat would spend a whole lot of time down in the basement. And I'm looking. I'm like, sometimes they'd be like, where'd you go? And he just be coming out from where he was, some of the furniture down there we just had in storage. But I kept finding I would make handmade catnip pillows, because my one cat would try to consume it all. So I make them big enough where it's harder for him to eat. So I just hand out of old socks or things like that and put catnip in them. But I kept finding them underneath the hot water tank or near the furnace all the time. I think there's still one in the house, maybe to this day. I have no idea, because I know there was one missing when we moved out. And I'm like, oh, okay. I'm like, all right. I'm like, whatever. I'm cool with that. But then I started having these weird, kind of like vivid, like you're awake kind of dreams. I don't know. Maybe it was like waking up like a half state, but I'd be laying in bed, and I bet it was higher at the time, a lot higher like that. So it's easy for me to get out of bed. And I remember laying there, and then it feels like my blankets were being pulled off. Not like it was before, but it felt like if you have like a small toddler trying to crawl into bed with you, like crawling into a big bed with you, where they're trying to climb up, but the blankets are just coming off. And then I felt something crawl into bed, and I'm like going, is that one of the cats, And I go look in a half sleep, kind of awake state where I'm sitting up in bed as this is actually happening. And I see this little thing. It looked like a cross between, it had like pants on, like short pants on that were like handmade, but besides that, completely, nude. And it kind of looked like a mix between, so like that Harry Potter character, a little Dobby character, I think his name is, I don't really sure, but he didn't look as skinny, but he had kind of like a little bit of the structure and the muscle structure of like the Lord of the Rings for Gollum in that sense. So that's how I'm trying to describe it all, at least to my family member, because I'm trying to mix the two at the time. Because I'm like, I don't know, it's kind of like a mix between the two, but I wasn't really good at doing a lot of realism drawing at the time, so I couldn't really show him exactly 100% what it looked like. So it kind of just felt like a small child, but it was more like an adult, but a little bit skinnier body, like I said, but a little bit more like Gollum. So I climbed into bed, and it looks like it might have been cold. He was just trying to cuddle in, like not trying to get underneath the blankets, but trying to like crawl, in beside me near my legs, and just kind of like just want to curl up on a little ball himself and just try to sleep. So like as I would sit up in bed though, and I try to take the sheets to like pull on them, I'd be like, well, yeah, you can't really lay in bed with me. And then I would kind of like more awake from that sleep state. And then, the image of him would be gone. But it would happen all the time. I wake up in the middle of the night thinking, I'm like, who's pulling my blankets? And I'm like, again. And I go look, same thing, trying to call in where it's cold. So I'm like, all right. So I don't know. But at the same time, we had an open basement at the time. So then we were there for like 2 years, and then we moved to downtown. And we're in the actual condo now. We're like way up there, about halfway, way up the condo now. So we're like about 13 or 14 floors up. It's a smaller place. And of course, he followed us there too. This time we hung out in the small little closet area again. We assume same thing of collection. At least my cat didn't end up in there this time. But there was like tinfoil balls, and we would do cleaning. Um, once like this is so we were there before the accident and after the accident. So before the accident, I'd go in there, open the door, and take everything out with the duster, and then take the balls out, and then put it back out so my cat would get to them again. And then later on, I think it was a couple nights later, I'm moving in. I would see like these little hands from right there, kind of look like little hands, like little kind of like bony, but more like fleshy hands. They look like small childlike hands, kind of like put it up through there and like trying to grab one of them, put it through, but the catnip pill would be too big, trying to pull it out. Or see a small little hand, the more like the tinfoil, you see it sliding through, and then my cat would go up to it, and he put a paws underneath there too, and you just trying to get in there, trying to get his stuff back, playing back. It was super cute. I'm like, okay, that's nice. And tomorrow I'll pull them out. We can try it all again. And then, um, it was like a couple years later, and then they had the accident. So then it was a little bit different, with everything else that I had. So now we know with dealing with epilepsy and a cervical spine damage, which is now permanent, but it became a little bit different. I couldn't do as much. So we had cleaners that would come in, and I found them all still in there again, pull them all out and pulling them all out. It was for a while. Sometimes it was kind of like he'd bring balls from there and then bring them back up to where I was, and then I would throw them, and then he would go chase them, but then he want to push them back. Sometimes he didn't just push them underneath there for that. It was just like time after time we just trying to take them all out. We still think we're also missing one somewhere underneath there again. There's always one missing, and then we ended up moving out of there. And now we're in the house. So now we're in the house, and we have a finished basement, and we were only here for a few months, and then my cat Gizmo got bone jaw cancer, and he passed away shortly after that. So, because he would go downstairs in the basement, spend a long time down in the basement. We found candy cane skin, but they were actually in the utility room where they have like, where they have like the electrical box and the furnace and the hot water tank and all that. It's all closed off as its own room. So we found out it was all in there now. And then sometimes it was out on the carpet on the outside part, which is fine. My other, and then I'm like, okay. Like, that's fine, whatever, you guys want to go down there. I'd go sit down there on the couch, and I'd be sitting there. Sometimes you see him walk around near the shadows or, go by for a second, kind of just trying to, like, hide. Like, I told him, you don't have to hide. Like, it's fine. And so after we came back from doing what we had to do with Gizmo, I came back, and I was, like, completely devastated because he was, like, my little toddler cat. Like, he was, like, because I can't have kids, so it was, like, a big thing for me. And he was the last cat that I had. Well, now I have a new rescue cat, but I remember going down there on the couch down there, and I said to him, I got to tell it to you straight. I told him exactly what happened. I said, he's not coming back here. He said, he might come back in spirit. He might. I said, but he, physically, he won't be coming back anymore. He'll be really playing me like he used to. And I felt bad. I sat there for a bit, I didn't really hear anything or see anything in response because he's never talked to me. And I felt really, really bad. And, the next day went down there because we were trying to get like a care box put together to some things we were going to have for the cremation, and then some things we were going to do for keeping it as a keepsake box. And then we're going down there, was candy canes all over the carpet, squishing the carpet, and you could see like the plastic ones everywhere. And I told my family member, I said, I'm gonna need some help cleaning this up, and they said yeah. And they know me really well too, and I'm like, and I told him what happened. He's like, he's probably just really upset. And I guess maybe he's binge eating. I don't know. And I'm like, okay. And then it was like months and months later, and I'm waiting, and I would try to go downstairs to check on him. And then, there was no trying to climb into bed. There was none of that. And I talked to them, my friends again, and my family again about the ones I know really well, not the other ones. And I asked him, I said, what do you think happened? He's like, well, you moved basically right in the border of the country. Like right across the street's a horse farm from where my subdivision is. And he said, well, maybe he decided to just move on. Like he was really, really friends, like, with your dwarf cat, and they're really close and stuff. Now he knows there's not much you can do like he used to. And You know, it's nice and all, but maybe he decided to move on. Maybe he found a mate. Maybe he found some companionship. Maybe he found a community. Maybe he liked being there. Like it's attached to like a farm and stuff, so it's there. And I think it's also a plot of land that's considered city protected as well, beside the farm. So like all I can think about is maybe he just moved on. Like he finally found a spot where he migrated a little bit with us, and I don't even know how he would have traveled because we literally took the plane. We moved from BC to here, but I don't know. But he's been gone for a while. I'm like, I'm a little upset. It's been a while. I miss him, but I'm like, 'cause it's like something that's been part of my life for such a long time, and it was different. Um, you know, there's another part to that too that I'll finish off with related to the house. When we moved in, besides the fact that there's a spirit that hangs around here, which we're cool with. That's I think it's attached to land, which we're fine with. He's okay. But I noticed that when we moved in, I did like instantly. I did protection and stuff set up for the house before we put the fence in. I wanted to do like I did the whole thing where I did like the whole house cleanse thing. It's a brand new home, and did the land cleanse thing. That I did the land protection thing, and I also did the offering thing because I'm very might be indigenous, but at the same time, like I just felt like with all the fae in my life, I should probably do besides like an offering to the land, too. This wasn't actually a horse farm where I'm on, so there was not like I was chopping down trees or anything because I couldn't have not moved into a place that did that. It was just like an empty plot. Um, and I said, okay, so I set up my stuff and everything. And then since then, what we've been doing is we've been getting great harvests. Like we set up the backyard where I have my herb garden, and a family member make me like an herb garden that's sorry, not a veggie garden that's kind of blocked off back there, but we have it set up and we made it out of. And then because of I can't bend over and stuff, I have to sit in a chair now. We have like a standing herb garden that I use, and I put stuff in there that I can use for like medicinal purposes, like rosemary and stuff like that. I can use to help with the things that I have to deal with. So, but every year when we do it around Samhain and stuff, and I think we do around the spring too, where we'll do anything that we grow in the garden throughout the harvest. If we haven't used it all, or even if it's like say it was on the plant, it was decaying like some of the tomatoes do, we just sit there and we just put it back into the ground and we do an offering like, you know what, we can't have this, maybe like a bug can have this or something else that's in the area, a bird or something can have. We just say it's an offering to the ground, like we just give an offering, we're giving it back. If we're using stuff like we're eating the carrots and you're not really eating like the green part of the carrot, you bring it back outside and put it in the ground, just let it sit on top. If a bug wants to take it, a bird wants to take it, something else wants to take it, it's an offering, here, give it back. We've been doing that for a couple of years now with the cycling, and I noticed that every year we have like our plants back there, they grow really crazy, like just insane. Like we've had like everything we've tried, it just grew really, really well. Like we've had zucchinis where they're really big, and we've had like they're like 20 inches long. We have huge big pumpkins. We've had like tomato plants that we would plant from the original plant that we got from Home Depot from the year before, like cycling through the exact same like the different plant, but the cycling again, and it would come up again. It was so weird. Like not that doesn't usually always happen. Do that with, but I've noticed that in the backyard sometimes at night you can see kind of looks like I thought there were bugs at the time because I know I've had dreams where I've had fae dreams where it kind of show up like little bugs, like little bumblebees and stuff and things like that. And I was like, oh, do we have any fireflies? Because I know I've seen them in the backyard. And I go looking out there, but they're different colors. There's like little specks of like purple and fuchsia and an indigo and yellow and going around in there and stuff. And I'm going, turn the lights, turn off the lights. You can see them better at night when you have the backyard light off. But it's just weird. Like you can't really get them on video because they move around and they're so small. Like my camera can't really pick up because I have a cell phone camera and I'm like on the second floor. But I was going, okay, that's cool. So it is interesting to see all that stuff in there, and I'm like, I must have a nice ecosystem. Like it's just crazy. Like I've had like a whole bunch of other bugs have been showing up. Like random Jews just have like spinner spiders. I've had a lot of praying mantises. I get these weird, like hard to find things you don't really see in Ontario, like these kind of snails. Like everything else just keeps coming in there, and I'm like going, what kind of ecosystem did I create back there? So yeah, that's the last of the stories that I have so far that are more recent.
Frozen Wolf, thank you for all of that storytelling in such great detail over such a long timeline, and for connecting so many of the thoughts back together there at the end. I do really appreciate that. Something I want to say, it just comes to mind because I'm listening to you speak. I was also in a really bad car accident. And I know you told me a little bit about the extent of some of the injuries you've suffered from your accident. Accidents are life-changing. They happen in a moment, and you could be like Mother Teresa and still get into a car accident. So, being a good person doesn't protect you from car accidents. They are truly random, horrible events. I also have a bed that's almost 2.5 feet off the ground, so I can get in and out of it easier. And, just for the audience listening, at one point I had to pretty much learn how to walk again, which took me 4 years after breaking my back in a serious rollover. So I just really want for the audience, just to extend some appreciation, I think, tonight for both you and I for showing up for this conversation. It's not easy for either of us, and the audience might not necessarily know that just listening. So I like to, just say that so that the audience does get a chance to acknowledge the effort both you and I have put into bringing this story forward. As we move forward from that point, and thank you for letting me, just acknowledge that a little bit. I hope that's okay. When you're talking about this little guy with just pants on, I'll tell you, I spoke with a gentleman not long ago who was driving his car, and he was coming along the highway pretty late, and he is alone on the road, and he's coming along, and he sees this thing that he thinks is like basically a garden gnome that someone has left on the road as a joke. That's what he thinks. And he's approaching it. And as he gets you're in a car, so you're traveling pretty fast. And so, as he's approaching it to where he's starting to be able to get a pretty good look at it, it turns and looks at him and gets startled by the car all of a sudden and takes off with incredible speed to the left. And he describes watching it just vanish into thin air. But he swears up and down this wasn't a hallucination. It was there. He can describe very detailed the way it snapped its head around and looked at him. And he also described it as being his way of describing it was that its legs and arms kind of looked like straws in comparison to its otherwise sort of chubby body. And I'm just curious if that description is similar to what you're trying to describe when you say sort of like a Gollum-esque limbs with your guy. I'm just curious if that feels like what you saw at all.
No, he kind of looked like he was just like I said, kind of like the Harry Potter Dobby thing in a way, where he kind of had like a skinnier kind of body, but looked 100% human, like in that sense. Yeah, so he didn't. Yeah, and he was skinnier and stuff. Like he was completely different than the weird gnome-looking thing at the beginning that was mean.
My apologies. I think I misunderstood earlier that you were saying skinny body for skinny limbs, and so that's why that came to mind. I'm going to have to look up the Harry Potter Dobby character when we are done speaking so that I have a good frame of reference in my mind for what you're talking about. Basically, just as we move towards the end of this conversation here tonight, and again, really appreciate your time and being here. All the stories that you've told are extremely interesting. And I do really appreciate that you've prepared for the conversation. Just for the audience listening, many people that I talk to take a great deal of time to prepare to speak with me. In your case and in others, many people are looking for a place where they can tell their stories in a constructive way without judgment. I think it's helpful. Like when I get to tell my story, I always feel better. Because what I saw is extremely difficult to put into words. And if I were to be describing my story to the audience here tonight, I would sound a very similar way to how you sound when you're describing many of the elements of your story. And so, I just really do think it is brave, and I do appreciate you being here and taking the time to share what you've seen and experienced with everybody. So with all that said, what I'd like to ask you, just as a final question before we go here tonight, is Frozen Wolf. I ask everybody who comes on the show this question. There is no wrong answer because no one really knows for sure. I'm just curious, what do you think that fairies are?
Not really 100% sure. I know with the stuff that I've looked up, they can be interdimensional beings, like then phase in and out of different different realities and stuff. Some of them are earthbound. Some of them might be in an alternate, maybe reality similar to us. Like they talk about that even with science and things. Another one I can think of is elementals, like the blue-eyed one. I think it was really close to elemental. The way he was dressed and looked, maybe he was part of a tribe like that. I have no idea. It definitely was with the rain. The other ones, I feel more like they were dark fae in that sense, just because they were mischievous. They wanted to be aggressive. The whole just like I said, the later on when finding out about the changeling kind of thing, it just felt different. So I'm not really sure 100% what they are at this point.
I really appreciate that honest answer. And if I'm honest, I have no idea what they are either. I just know I saw one. And like you, I have no doubt because I've experienced this phenomena. What you said at the top there about interdimensional, I do talk about that a fair amount on this show. And I think that there is, like not that I know, but I'll just finish with this thought to share these ideas with you. I do think that fairies and other energy beings are a normal part of Earth. I also think that reality as we experience it and time as we experience it is one way of perceiving what is taking place on Earth. And I think that there are other levels. You can call it levels. You could call it planes of existence. You could call it dimensions. It doesn't really matter. You could even call it things from which magic can draw forth stuff. You could use any kind of language that you want. I think everyone is talking about the same phenomena, which is that we do live in a multi-dimensional, overlapping, there's a lot of things existing on Earth in the same place at the same time, and they don't always necessarily physically overlap. They're overlapping energetically. And at times, they can make their way into this plane of existence. And I think also we can make our way into those planes of existence. And I think that that is a super deep thing to unpack, but I think that fairies are real, and I think that they come from somewhere equally real. And I don't think it's that mysterious or that difficult to conceive, because we ourselves have a soul within ourselves that you can't really see, touch, or contain, but we know it's there. And I do think there's something to that allows this all to kind of work itself out. And I don't have the answers, but hearing your stories, some of the stories that you've shared are some of the first times I've heard particular details of Fae experiences firsthand from somebody. So extremely thrilling to hear some stuff that actually goes back a long way from somebody in contemporary times. Very interesting to hear that. And so with that said, and again, with just a lot of appreciation for your time here tonight, Frozen Wolf, from all of our human and non-human listeners tuning in tonight to the Fascinating Fae podcast, just a big thanks to Frozen Wolf for making herself available and coming on the show. And just a gentle reminder to anybody in the audience listening, if you've had an encounter and you'd like to come on the show, just shoot me an email at encounters@fascinatingfae.com. You can also check out fascinatingfae.com. I make original episode art for each episode for free, and I do put some show notes and other liner notes for the episodes that you might find interesting. And actually, that reminds me, just before we go, Frozen Wolf does keep a blog about some of her fairy insights and experiences. And would you be so kind as to just share that link with everybody right now, please?
Yes. I do a blog that I've been slowly digitalizing my past experiences, journals, artwork, scrapbooking, and stuff since I was a kid. Anything with the paranormal or my own experience, photographs and everything since I was a kid. So I'm slowly digitalizing. It just takes a little bit with a brain injury, but we're getting this. So right now I have, I think, a few stories on there. I'm going to add the ones tonight because I actually, with my notes, I'm just going to maybe add those tonight or the next few days. But it's on Blogspot, which used to be called Blogger. It's lightshadowca.blogspot.com.
Okay, Frozen Wolf, thank you so much for sharing that link and your story with us tonight. Again, just really appreciate you being here. Really appreciate you taking the time. And again, on behalf of everybody listening, just a big thanks for taking the time to share your stories with us tonight.
Thinking of the weight of the world and I'm carrying the largest load. Waiting to arrive by whatever there lies at the end of the road. If anybody's listening, then please do heed the call. If ever there was need, it's time to tumble all the walls. Is there anybody out there anyway? Is there anybody out there anyway? Thinking of the nature of man, and is there weatherman's hand, and still the bombs aren't bad. And you can feel the thunder of the babies when they blow. And you can see the halos when they walk into the room. Is there anybody out there anyway? Is there anybody out there anyway? Well, I don't see how there can actually be, or else they would try to intervene. Is anybody out there anyway? Is there anybody out there anyway? Is there anybody out there anyway? Is there anybody out there anyway? Well, I don't see how there can actually be, or else they would try to intervene.